Okay, folks, also with us, besides myself and Chuck Lynn, is Tish Odell, and Tish is a Ohio Community Rights Network board member and CELDF organizer since 2012, working for Rights of Nature and Community Rights, which also Ohio Community Rights Network works toward. So first let me introduce, and we're honored to have the filmmaker, producer of this great film, Seeds of Vandana Shiva, Jim Beckett. And then I'll let Tish introduce our other two panelists here. So Jim has quite an amazing, varied career to his filmmaking. Before that, he was a developmental economist, a human rights lawyer, journalist, and author. As Director of Public Information for the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, Jim made several films about international refugee problems around the world. Since then, he has co-produced several documentaries on contemporary environmental issues, one being The Green Patriarch, another on the Amazon, another on the Arctic, another on the, it's in Spanish, on the indigenous people of the Amazon. And Jim's most recent film was the multi-award-winning film Sons of Africa, before this one. And his awards include Best Film Awards, 2 Humanitas Awards, and a George Foster Peabody Award. So we're really delighted to have him with us. And so Tish, I'll let you introduce our other guest.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah. Obviously, the film focuses a lot on India and not so much here in the States. So we thought it was really important to bring in some speakers and the voices of people in Ohio that have to do with farming and food production. And so we're really excited to have Sherry Fleming join us. Sherry and her husband, Ted, live on a small homestead in rural Northwest Ohio. Sherry has a bachelor's degree in animal science production and worked in the swine and dairy industry after graduation. Over 20 years ago, Sherry and other members of their rural community found themselves organizing to protect themselves and the environment from the impacts of factory farms. Since that time, she's worked at the state and local levels on issues involving environmental justice, local food networks, water quality, industrial scale agriculture, fracking, and water privatization. In 2006, Sherry helped found the local grassroots citizen group, the Williams County Alliance, whose mission is to promote a sustainable future through education and citizen action. And they currently find themselves working very hard to prevent the next threat, which is a land-based industrial scale genetically engineered salmon facility from locating in Williams County where she lives. So she also serves as a board member of the Ohio Community Rights Network and is a coordinator for the Bryan Food Co-op. So welcome, Sherry. And then we also have Scott Singer as one of our panelists. And Scott grew up on a small farm in Northwest Ohio, where his family grew grain and maintained a small herd of beef cattle. He has a degree in natural resource management, specializing in wildlife biology and management. He took a position with the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service in Northeast Pennsylvania as a wildlife biologist, assisting private landowners with land management on both public and private lands. Much of his work revolved around the implementation of conservation practices designed to enhance wildlife habitat while protecting water quality and soil health through the establishment of grasslands and restoration of forested riparian areas. Scott and his family now manage their family farm, and they continue to operate the farm today as a grain hay farm, growing a modest amount of prairie grass for livestock forage and seed production. Scott looks to expand the use of grasslands on their farm and others as a multifunctional cropping system. Scott and family are currently bringing a few more acres of native grass into production as a seed crop and hope that this will be a continuing trend on their farm. So welcome, Scott. Very good to have you with us.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Tish. Just to let you know, those of you who don't know, Again, I'm Bill Lyons with the Ohio Community Rights Network, and we're a statewide grassroots network working to educate, empower, and motivate Ohioans to build equitable communities, to secure the rights of democratic local self-governance, and to establish the rights of nature to exist and flourish throughout Ohio. And Simply Living, and Chuck Lynn is with Simply Living here and helping us co-sponsor the series. Simply Living connects people with learning opportunities that promote sustainability, environmental justice, and our local economy. Simply Living provides community education for a more sustainable and equitable world. They envision a compassionate and sustainable world through personal, community, and cultural transformations. Okay, so we'll get to the questions now. We've got some prepared. And if you have any questions, please put those in the chat and we'll try to get to as many as we can. So I'd like to begin with Jim. Jim, can you tell the viewers of how this film came about and what you wanted to accomplish with this film?
Wow. Okay. Yes. I was involved in a series of shipborne symposia, which brought religious leaders and scientists together, often estranged communities, but there was a common interest in preserving our planet. So we went on board a ship to a body of water, and there were 8 of those. Vandana Shiva was one of the participants. So that's where I met her. And, she's an amazing woman. So at one point I proposed, what if we made a film about you? And she said, okay, yes. So that is how it started. And 8 years later, people are seeing the film. So what did I want to achieve with this? Well, I wanted people to eat better. That's something. No, certainly the goal would be that there would be people more active in relation to food, in relation to agriculture. And I think the message has gotten out there. And Vandana, of course, deals with climate change. She deals with agriculture. She's brilliant. She's written 21 books. I remain in awe of her. So anyway, she's a controversial person, and she gets attacked, etc. This was a chance for her to have her day in court.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Jim. Excellent. Okay, Tish, go ahead.
Oh, no, I just probably made a facial expression when he
Oh, no, I said, yeah, if you want to ask the next question.
Oh, no, I was going to say that she was attacked. I think a lot of us that have been involved in the work we're doing, we can relate to that, when you challenge the status quo narrative or whatever, you get attacked. So, yeah.
I think when you try to take the bear's honey, the bear is going to attack, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not to mention the bees.
Oh, yes.
I wanted to really quick just throw out to Scott and Sherry, so similar to Jim, what parallels do you see between farming depicted in the film in India and what you have seen here in Northwest Ohio? Who wants to go first, Sherry or Scott?
Well, I guess one thing that struck me was sort of this timeline and how quickly things can happen. For instance, in 2012, when I came back from Pennsylvania to Ohio to start farming, it was still common practice on our farm for us to be saving seed, soybeans in this case, for the next years. And we've done that for years. And I no longer do that. That's just the reality of the business. That has changed just in the matter of a decade, where I think I'm not alone there. We're not alone in our situation where the seeds on the market have sort of eliminated that practice, at least the legal practice of that from our farms. So it happens quickly, right before your eyes, and voluntarily. It was our choice. It wasn't like somebody forced us to do this. This just the situation at hand. So that's one thing that struck me as, you know, similar, and it happens quickly.
Was that because of legislation that you had to do it, or?
No, and not to dwell too much on this, but the fact of the matter is, seeds and the genetic traits in those seeds sold to the farmers are addressing specific needs. And in our situation, those needs are the resistance to herbicides, which allow us to use those herbicides in our operation to control some very troublesome emerging weeds out there that you know, threaten the cleanliness of our fields. And so you look to those new traits, those new genetics, to use that system then in implementing, you know, your herbicide recipe out there on the landscape. So it's a need. You have to have those genetics traits to use those systems. You could illegally save those seeds. Nobody might know or find that out. I do know people in the neighborhood that still do that. I choose not to. It's a cost, you know, $60 to $100 an acre that you could avoid if you just saved your own seed, but it's not legal and or the right thing to do when you're talking about that. So
Yeah.
Sherry, did you want to add something?
I guess most of my experience, and it's kind of from the outside looking in, has been more with the livestock and poultry industry. But just, I came to this area about 1980, worked with the dairy industry as a milk tester through the Dairy Herd Improvement Association. And at that time, there were a number of smaller dairies, but you began to see this shift into economies of scale. But we've seen, boy, within the last 10 years where, I mean, I almost feel like the livestock farmers are forced into vertical integration where they've lost a lot of their being able to be independent, that they have to be linked into a corporate. They're just part of a corporate vertical integration where it's divided into, you may farrow the pigs and then you may take them from weaning, you know, up to feeder pig size and then finished out. But they're controlled so much by the large corporate, at least from what I see happening, so that more of what you think of as farmers having that independent streak that they have, I feel like they have to fit into the system. And if they don't fit into the system, then they have to find their own markets and learn to survive, which I think makes it very difficult for them to do, because the system, at least from what I see, is set up to encourage what Scott faces, kind of, that it makes it, you know, difficult to be independent.
Right. So in other words, between crops being commodities and not food, and making farmers sign contracts is what that's what I'm hearing. And then also with subsidies from like you follow the rules because of either subsidies, you've signed a contract, all this. So is that what you're kind of getting at, Sherry and Scott?
Well, I know, like, at least in hog production, and I think you're seeing it in poultry, where you become almost a contract farmer. Like in our area, Cooper Farms is big into the hog industry. And I don't know enough about like the poultry aspect, but you do see so many finishing barns, and there's contracts I know that they sign and agreements, which I really haven't seen. But I know people farmers that used to raise hogs, that it was done so much differently, but they've lost the markets to be able to sell if they aren't part of this system.
one of the issues is that as things progressed and as scales of production increased across the landscape, margins for farmers became increasingly narrow. So, farmers that were having small herds found themselves just breaking even or losing money on a regular basis, and that becomes really unattractive for a high, for a labor intensive industry. You got to love them to do it, and you really got to love them to do it and not make money. So therein lies the problem, where then, okay, well, you're going to increase your scale, so you're going to put out a lot of capital to put up this building and sign into this agreement to be able to be profitable to do it in this new method of sort of integration into the system. So it's just a scale issue and profitability, and driving people to make choices that, if you want to grow animals, this is sort of a model that companies will allow you and to enter the market and grow those animals, that you're just doing it by a different set of rules and regulations.
Okay. Well, along the lines of farming and industrial farming, Vandana says in the movie that industrial farming is the biggest destructive force in terms of earth and society. I wanted to get your reasons why you think that's the case, or your reactions to that statement. Anyone.
Well, I think she feels that industrial agriculture, this is very interesting, Scott. And I mean, what you're saying, from Vandana's perspective, it's not very hopeful. But I think she's saying it's very industrial agriculture is destructive because our water, our soil, the soil is being depleted because of the use of chemical fertilizers and herbicides, as Scott just mentioned. They're 10 times more than they were 30 or 40 years ago. And this is destroying our resource of healthy soil. And also, of course, we have climate change added to this, and that involves how you farm. And in industrial farming is a very capital intensive industry. That's not the most articulate explanation, but yes, I think industrial agriculture is contributing to not good things for the future of our planet.
And just to add to that, if I may, that as humans, we've made some pretty sizable landscape alterations, and the largest single landscape alteration in the history of humans was the destruction of the North American prairie for the for the implementation of what we consider today's agriculture. And so you're talking about 300 million acres. So from a scale standpoint, even if you're being as least trying to have the least impact on that acreage as possible, just operating at 300 to 400 million acres is a huge impact across the landscape. So, even if we do it right, we're still going to have negative impacts. And so to call it the largest impact on the planet is probably an understatement. We're by far, we have the most impact in the agriculture industry on our land, and that's not just because of what we're doing on it, but at the scale that we're doing it. So we really need to think about things that can be implemented at large scales, because doing little things helps, but we're talking about hundreds of millions of acres.
What about the fact that other things that have happened because of it, like monocultures, and that we lose biodiversity, and aspects of that, and Jim mentioned the soil, very important, because that also helps us absorb carbon. But what about that aspect of things, that we've lost these diversity of seeds because of corporations want you to grow one kind of thing most of the time, right? So they can control it.
Yeah, I was like think in the movie where she talks about just the different varieties of rice that India,
Mhm.
I mean, hundreds of varieties, and it's down to, you know, a few. And I'm thinking here, same thing here in Northwest Ohio, that, you know, we're looking, and, you know, that's why I wanted you guys from Northwest Ohio to be on the panel. And I thought it was so important because I think there's a disconnect between what the general public believes, you know, is farming here, and that it's really like what you've said, Scott, you know, it's an industrial practice here, because we're looking at the crops that are grown as commodities, which is much different than looking at them as food for people to eat.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
you know, as you deplete the soil with all the nutrients and things like that, that's also depleting us ourselves. So again, there's that connection to nature, right? That what we put in our bodies and from the food that we eat comes from the soil. So if you deplete one, you're depleting all.
Mhm. Mhm.
Good point.
Mhm.
I would just add from about the commodity aspect of farming as part of the global economy, and not just in agriculture, but more generally. People didn't vote on the global economy. It's been taken over, colonized, as if you will. And that the shift to local is a theme that Vandana Shiva is very passionate about.
Mhm.
Even the United Nations has issued reports saying the only way to feed the planet is to go back to local farming, which is a big part of her work and supporting local farmers and return to that. So I think it's also fascinating that it's in India and it's in Northwest Ohio. It's everywhere. It's no accident that we're comparing India with Northwest Ohio, because it's all over the planet.
Mhm.
So we need to
Mhm.
shift to local.
Yeah.
Is a family farm a romantic notion from the past? I mean,
Hmm.
you know, that was sort of the backbone of America, despite the Dust Bowl, you know, family farms, and maybe that is a romantic notion.
Well, there's a bit of an argument to be made that, you know, many of the controversies with regard to farms that are put in neighborhoods around where I'm at, one group wants to say stop the factory farm, and the other group wants to say this is our family's farm. So people need to realize that what you're seeing as a factory farm is nowadays some family's farm. And that's just the system that they're operating in right now. So, you know, you kind of have to put it in perspective and understand that the farmers are out there, that it's just a different kind of small farmer now. And so it's something to keep in mind, that, you know, it's again about scale and what you're operating at. So
What one aspect is that the average age of the American farmer apparently is like 58 or so. And young farmers who want to go into organic, the price of land is so high that these young people who want to go organic, you know, you have to come up with some system that would allow them to have land. And so there is a kind of crisis in the age situation. I don't know if that speaks to what you said, Scott, but that is something out there, whether we call it factory or family or, yeah.
Well, one of the things people may have heard, and if you read Vandana and some of her other pieces or listen to her on YouTube or some of her interviews she gives, she talks about Bill Gates a lot. And I was surprised to find out this past fall that Bill Gates's name even comes up in Northwest Ohio. So what you're talking about, Jim, that, you know, young people coming in can't afford to buy it. And, you know, that's part of the problem. And that was the story we heard from a different family farmer up there, is, you know, say a farmer is too old, he says, I want to retire, and a young farmer wants to buy it, and they can offer so much per acre, but then Bill Gates comes in and offers, you know, way more than that, and they can't compete with that.
He's the largest agricultural landholder in the States.
Yeah, amazing.
What the heck? A Harvard dropout is now into agriculture?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure we'll come back to related ideas here to this. There's so many in the film. So
Well, it's again to the whole system. And if anyone has followed, and I'm sure a lot of the people on chat have followed CELDF and community rights and all of that work, that's what we talk about all the time, the system. It's the system is set up. I mean, and Scott, you talked about how hard it is. Well, we know that this isn't just with food production, that they control things between the legislations passed, the subsidies that they'll give, so whether it's energy production, food production, whatever, the system is set up to benefit a certain, class of people.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
do we want to go to the next question here?
Sure. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. I know in the movie, you speak, and Vandana speaks the power of the Chipko movement in 1973, when the women hugged the trees to stop the violence of logging. And I'm just curious, what we can learn from this, because we talk a lot about changing the laws, but we think it's going to take a lot more than that, the movement for change isn't just about legal shift, but it's about cultural shift in the way people think. So yeah, I'm curious, your thoughts on that, Jim, and then the other panelists as well.
Well, this brings in the whole thing of forests. Scott mentioned the prairie, and at the same time, forests were covering the landscape. And they're a very important part of the whole agricultural system, or trees. And the Chipko movement, as say in the film, that spread worldwide in the sense that people know, stop the logging here, or let's do it rationally. So yeah, that was a very inspiring message. And also, we're now very much more into recognizing indigenous knowledge, indigenous rights. And Vandana made that point, that she learned so much from these women who depended on the forest for their livelihood, and that we should not discount, and that brings, when we're talking about the prairie, we're thinking of herds of buffalo across the landscape, and now we have herds of John Deere tractors across the landscape. So.
I guess I just like to bring up a situation in our county. We happen to be reliant on an aquifer that's very prolific. I mean, the county that I live in is basically wholly dependent on it, and it extends into part of Michigan and into Indiana. And right now, Tish had mentioned that we're facing this land-based genetically engineered salmon farm. And the thing that people find so objectionable about it is it has been permitted to pull out over 5 million gallons of water a day, and they will be dumping close to the same amount of water they will pool every day. And yet they state that this is a conservation plan, and they use a recirculating plan. And it's because of the way the system is set up, the people in our community that will be directly affected by this believe that, I mean, they don't even have a problem really if the company would be able to recycle the majority of the water, but they find it such a foolish waste of a precious resource that we need to survive. And so we find ourselves, and I guess when I look at the women who stepped up, people get so beaten down because they don't have any ability to say no to this in the law. And so, but they also, I think, part of the problem is they still have a lot more power than they really understand if they stand united, even to speak out in large numbers. I mean, I realize the laws need change, but there is so much power in a group effort on a large scale in communities to stand up and push back. And I guess that's what's so inspiring to me, that those women did what they did in numbers that they did, that it made a difference. And I guess we've kind of struggled in our county because we faced a number of different issues. And a few times, I mean, we've actually won, only not because of the law allowed us to say no, but because so many people stood up and said, this is wrong, we don't want this. And the corporation decided, sadly, they went to some other community and left ours. There is such power in people uniting and standing up and saying no.
Right, and what they did, hugging the trees, I mean, that was direct action, right? I mean, it was, they were
Right.
doing that, and part of it is they were willing to put themselves on the line and take this, I mean, and take a stand for what they believed in. And I think a lot of us have to really ask ourselves, what are we willing to put ourselves on the line for?
And notice that they didn't go and appeal to the elected representatives because they probably thought it wasn't going to do them much good there. And sometimes we do that, but a lot of times they're also heavily influenced by these big monetary powers. And so that sometimes this is necessary, it seems, and more effective.
And Vandana is someone who understood the system and was able to go to the Supreme Court often. So, you know, illiterate women, you know, people need an advocate if you're going to work within the system. So unless there's an outright revolution,
Right.
where the leadership is, you know, kicked out, but that's not happening.
Right. Yeah.
One thing, if I might add, one thing that makes it increasingly difficult for change, agriculture is inherently resistant to change, but when we're talking about this and activists making a difference and just being heard and confronting the system, one thing that I find extremely difficult to comprehend is how you do that when the system is us, right? So like, we are like, if folks wanted to stand up and confront the system, they're going to be confronting their neighbors, they're the people in their community who are the farmers like myself, like, and so when we think about, well, how do we make this change? Who do we point the finger at? You're not going to go chain yourself to Monsanto's door or something, or you know, again, the angst directed at the farmer doesn't do much good, because it's the farmer is just trying not to go out there and make a living in the system. So, you know, we have to keep that in mind, that when we're trying to talk with, you know, about change and inspire change, where do we do that most effectively? Because we are the problem, and we are the ones that need to make the change. And so it's just it's a challenge in the system that we, you know, I see every day.
What was the famous Pogo line? I don't know if you remember the cartoon Pogo. We've encountered the enemy and it's us. Something like that.
Yeah, we have to change our minds. Yeah. There's I got some questions in the chat, so let me get to one of those. Says, I'll just read it. Do you think it's feasible to do what Vandana has been doing in the places she has that would translate here? Small scale, large scale. Can we not involve individual people that can work collectively to make a larger impact, and developing a knowledgeable grassroots movement to be able to influence policies? I know that's several questions there, but what about, I guess the main thing is, do you think that it's feasible to do, or are some people doing what she's been doing there over here?
Yeah, I think, I mean, that question really speaks to your grassroots movement and your earth democracy, which is one of Vandana's concepts, local. I mean, that fits exactly with what your mission statement is. So I think answering that question, you guys are the best.
Thanks. Yeah. So, well, let's see. I might as well ask that, if you don't mind, Tish, about the earth democracy. Then that's one that, yeah, I wanted to get to too. So I'm glad you brought that up there. So Yeah, I think because Tish has done a lot of speaking and talk about rights of nature, and that's one of the things can you explain to people how Earth democracy and rights of nature are similar in their philosophies?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we get really, I think, confused, right, in all these different terminologies and what's going on, and and the illusion that we have about certain terminology. And to me, Earth democracy is including all life on the planet in our democracy, instead of just the humans. Currently only humans, and only some humans maybe, and all corporations though can participate in our democracy. And rights of nature would at least open up the door to give other species and life an opportunity to participate, I guess, in our version of democracy. And I really like in the film, Vandana says, the Declaration of Human Rights is empty without rights of nature. The idea that we can live without nature is wrong, right? I mean, I don't know if it was in yours, film, or I've been watching so many films, I get confused, but again, do we think we can live without bees? I don't think so. I mean, if bees go and other insects, we could be in real trouble. So it has nothing to do with size or being able to articulate, words very well. It's again, that idea that we believe we're greater than, right, and superior to other forms of life. When we're part of the whole, we separate ourselves, that whole like, separating ourselves out. So we can't live, our egos and our illusion of superiority, I think, over nature seems to get in, that has to get out of the way if we're going to survive as a species. And of course, I don't believe rights of nature is the end goal, but again, that idea that we have to move from where we are closer to where we want to get. And I think rights of nature is a good start to move closer to that, where we need to be.
Yeah. All right, well, anybody have anything else to say? Otherwise, Tish, I'll let you go with the next question.
Let's see. I think I want to ask this one. Vandana speaks about a systems approach that must be used for science to be relevant and useful, and that harms have been caused by a reductionist approach of science. Logging and limestone mining are two examples in the film. If you have any others that come to mind, but I know we get, as activists, a lot of times we hear that, right, about follow the science. And so curious what some of your thoughts and opinions are about that topic.
Sorry, who did you ask?
Any of you, any of you.
Well, I'll comment. I think that traditional science has, and most of us are aware that we're part of nature, we're not separate from nature. So our values need to be shifting to ecological context. So the ecological sciences, the ones that connect that we're part of an entangled universe, the whole world, and it's the same for the social world. We need to recognize that we're part of the system. We met the enemy, it's us. And I think we're seeing change from the bottom up, as Jim and Tish have pointed out. Lots of changes happening from the bottom up, and it's often obscured by the fact that it's not covered much by the mainstream corporate media. So I think when we think about what's emerging from the bottom up is a new culture. And in Simply Living, we like to say it's shifting from this 30-year bubble of overconsumption, or the consumer culture, which is now global, and shifting that to an ecological culture. So it's really all the specific things. We need to reduce emissions. We need to quit, less industrial farming, more local organic farming, et cetera. Those are all good, but those are happening as a result of people changing their values. And those values see us as part of, and our communities are part of the larger system, including nature. Nature is not separate, but we pay attention because we connect with it in a real visceral way. We value that.
Right. I mean, and science, she says in the film, science without understanding of all the consequences is not science. You know, and someone put in the chat asking about where she calls out the woman and asking, you know, who's paying you, who's funding you? Well, it's got the same thing with the data, right? Like, we don't question that, like, oh, it's data. Well, where did the data come from? Who collected it? Who paid for it? And, you know, we also have this mentality that we don't see ourselves. We've conditioned to believe that only people with PhDs and lots of initials after their names, right, can respond to the problems and come up with solutions. We need to have more faith in ourselves. I mean, we, the people who have lived in a community for a long time and in nature and on the land, we have knowledge and we have to value that. And that comes from that indigenous perspective. It's not, so we have to somehow combine these two, right? And Vandana, I think, does a really good job of that, because she does have the academic background, but she also has more of this indigenous belief, being able to manage the land and understand it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like when it's easy, and if somebody's paying you, to look at one item in isolation and then try to make that the best you can. But it's going to interact with so many things. And when you change that one thing, you don't know the consequences fully of how that's going to change so many other things. And that's what's happened, right?
Yeah, we only look at the monetary, right? We look at how many jobs is it going to bring? How much profit is it going to bring? How much share investment return, you know, is it going to bring? And we kind of stop there. That's like our only criteria for, you know, or that we're told for monitoring if a project should continue or not continue. And we need to be looking at all the way, like that, what's that saying, from great cradle to grave, right? That for the consequences all the way following it through to the end, you know, the waste that's produced, where's that going to go? You know, how much water is going to be depleted? And if we taught at CELDF, we did a translation of the Los Cedros case in Ecuador of the cloud forest. And that kind of brought in, the court looked at that, the whole, not just part of the project, and also looking at the precautionary principle. So when we consider a project, let's look at all the impacts it could have, not just the monetary.
Yeah. Yeah. So Jim, and then and also anyone else who wants to comment. I don't think this was specifically in the film, but in your website, it's a great website. I encourage people to explore, and you've got videos, and then you've got a tab called News, and I clicked on that, and then it has little segments about Earth democracy and other things. And in one of those, I found a statement of Vandana's that I found very profound. She said that all violence, whether on people or nature, begins with separation. Wanted to get your thoughts on that. What comes to mind? Anything?
Well, now I'm just processing it as I don't remember it. Yes. I mean, that sounds like wisdom, but I have nothing to add to that particular wisdom. But
what kind of separation we think we can think on talking about that?
And that we live in such a violent world now. I mean, our landscape is so dire at the moment, and it is about, I mean, you look at our country, it's just absolutely fractured. So that's separation. And unfortunately, it is leading to violence. So yes. Oh gosh, I don't want to get really depressed here. There's Vandana has a very positive message.
Well, isn't the positive thing to say that, well, then we should try to connect ourselves, whether through community or to nature. And so that's the way, rather than to realize we are being separated in these ways. That's leading to our
it's great what you guys are exactly working against that. I mean, trying to create community and local democracy. So bravo for you.
Thanks.
As I say, you're walking the walk and I'm just here talking the talk. Okay.
Well,
it takes all of it, though. That's planting seeds, the education. Without the film for people to watch, we wouldn't be having the conversation. So
exactly.
yourself short.
Yeah.
Scott, did you want to
thank
add
you.
something?
Well, just that whole idea of separation is very stark in the agricultural world. Like we I'll speak to the generation before me, but it's such a system based on sterilization.
Mm.
Your whole goal as a clean farmer in the neighborhood is to have the cleanest fields out there, pest free. Just that represents some high yield potential. So we've been told, right? And so this whole beat back nature at all cost, I think, inspires the farmers to separate themselves mentally from nature, because as a farmer, I don't want to feel like I'm destroying something I love, right? If I love nature and I see a native plant, but that native plant is in my field, now it's a weed. Well, now I have to kill it, right? And so I think psychologically, it's a separation that comes inherently with the industry, is that that's the other stuff. These are my crops. And until we get that whole sort of interaction and systems approach to things, we're never going to fix that. They're always just going to be weeds and bugs. And so the separation needs to happen in everybody, or the reconnection needs to happen in everybody, but most importantly, the farmer. So when I'm out there looking at things, I try to keep things in mind, like, this is bigger than me and what I'm doing in my field. This is a plant or an animal that exists, and so can I lessen my impact or do more to repair those connections, to bring back something that may be beneficial that I've completely swept aside. So the connection thing is huge. The separation thing is inherent in agriculture and is very poisonous, because it just leaves a lot of stuff in the dust that we're not even thinking about. We're not going to get back to it if we don't sort of reconnect to it.
Very well said. Yeah, thanks, Scott.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll try to be brief and point out that in the transition from the indigenous native cultures around the world, the thing that separated them from us today is literacy. So we think of literacy, which it is it's a gift. It's opens our symbolic world to huge things, but it also allows us to consider that we can control nature. We can use our techniques and our technologies that come out from this, that are spun off from this literacy and science. So again, just the importance that Scott was saying of reconnecting and recognizing that it's bigger than just us. It's a gift to be an individual, to be separate from nature. If you look up nature in the dictionary, it talks about the stuff outside us. But that we have a new understanding, and we need to make that shift to recognize that we're part of something larger. Earth democracy.
Yeah. All right, Tish, you got a next question?
Sure, hold on.
Good thoughts. Yeah.
I'm listening. I just watched the other day too. I put it in chat in case any of you may have, I hadn't watched it in a long time, but it was called Farmageddon. And they talk to farmers all over the country, some in Ohio, some in Virginia, I know, on the East Coast, some in California, and it's available on YouTube. It's free. So it's a very interesting movie if you want to watch that. Let's see. Oh, we have a question. Let's see, from the chat, I think.
Yeah, I think
From
there's
Lisbeth, she's a member of UUYO in Youngstown, which is how I got on the call. She lives in Meadville and currently works at Ernst Conservation Seeds. And she's wondering, she saw Scott's hat.
Yep, that's Scott's hat. I saw that hat.
Ernst, which is all about promoting native seeds and warm season grasses, pollinator seeds, and wetland seeds, fits into this great picture. Surely they are doing some good. So Scott, you want to answer that?
I'll try. I mean, Ernst has been working in native grass seed production for a long time. mostly for conservation purposes. We've dabbled in projects where we've done it, growing prairie grasses for other purposes, and they're, you know, I think personally, if we have any chance of scaling up a meaningful agriculture system in this country and across the world, in fact, it's going to be based in native systems, native plants, because of their efficiency, their inherent efficiency, you know, thousands upon thousands of years of surviving on their own, right? And so we can employ these plants in our agricultural systems. We just have to rethink. We have to really sort of break down our misconceptions about our agriculture and emphasize efficiency. And we're going to see how these plants play a large role in fixing a lot of our problems. So yes, prairie plants, the prairie is, again, what I'll go back to is that's our best hope. You know, 50 million bison can't be wrong, right? We grow meat sort of like this completely illogical way, because we broke this system down into individual parts and then took them and controlled them. And in fact, all you need to do is feed a cow some grass. And so somewhere along the line, we forgot that as farmers. As we break our systems down and get them to be more efficient, we're going to look at native systems, native grasses, the things that we plowed under 200 years ago and didn't take good notes on. Those are the things that we're going to have to relearn and put back on the landscape in large quantities to make this happen. And folks at Ernst, some other places, some other organizations, you know, we've been kind of pounding away at it, trying to make it work. And really it comes down to where's the profitability for the farmer. And so that's what we're focused on nowadays.
Well, yeah, along that line, one other I definitely wanted to get to, and I know we're getting close here, maybe about 5 or so minutes left. Another one of, and this is anybody can comment on, another of Vandana's quotes in the film is, "When money is your master, then your conscience is no longer your guide." So isn't this a consequence of capitalism that makes everything a commodity, even nature and life itself, to be exploited for maximum profits? So since capitalism won't be changing anytime soon, do we have to find creative ways or alternative systems to get around this? And is it going to be mostly at the local level? Just my thought, but I want to see what your thoughts are.
That was my favorite quote in the movie. I love that. I see that. My father asks me why I do things strange sometimes, or don't make the same decisions. And he said, you know, oftentimes he refers to just the bottom line. And that's reality in farming. You know, you're not farming, in most cases, you're farming to put food on the table and to live. So money is important. The light bulb come on above my head at some point. I thought to myself, look, the only way this is going to get done is bottom line. It has to be the money driven aspect of it. So farmers will make the choice to change if it's more profitable. So if we can make that more profitable in a system that is ecologically friendly, we win, and that will spread like wildfire through a prairie, right? And so when we do that, you have to keep that in mind, that if money's making all of these decisions, not always the best decisions are going to be made. And for farmers, it is about the profitability. So it's very striking and very powerful statement, and something to keep in mind when engaging with the community, the agriculture community.
Well,
Sure,
well, Sherry, yeah, for you, I was going to say the salmon, that's a good, and then the labeling, because we as consumers of food have a great, like, we could contribute a lot, but the labeling laws. So I was going to direct that at you.
Well, I guess even beyond that, I just believe that there are many costs that are externalized. And I mean, even if you look at the labor in a lot of the larger CAFOs, it is typically Hispanic labor. And there's a reason for that, because they can be exploited. And the fact that our food is cheap, I mean, I read a quote one time, if something's cheap, then you need to start and look for why, because there's a reason for that. And I guess it goes back to our value system of what do we value? And if we don't take all aspects of that into consideration, I mean, it's just different things. When I worked in the hog industry, and it's gotten to the point of, you know, with the gestation crates, where you take a creature like a sow and put her in this small confined space for most of her life. They've become like machines. And I guess, but it goes back to, I don't think the public really, they see these little pictures of a hen sitting on a nest or a happy cow out in the field. They don't really see what these facilities sometimes look like. And sadly, the farmer has become, like you said, Scott, it's too bad it's become so adversarial, because I think there's been an effort to try and make it that way of city versus, you know, the rural areas or whatever. And I don't think it's that should be that divisive. I mean, in our group, we've got a really diverse group, but we make sure that we try to keep out those things that would fracture us apart. That we have a lot more in common than we realize if we focus on that.
Yeah. Any last thoughts, Jim?
Last thoughts. No, it's been an honor for me to, and I've learned so much here. I just admire what you guys are doing. So, you know, Vandana just had her 70th birthday, and she's going strong, and she's doing her part, and all of you are doing your parts. So
are you.
You know, I'm most impressed, and I thank you very much.
Yeah, well, we thank you so much. Anybody else have any last things they'd like to say before we close here?
Well, we have a United States USDA farm bill, which subsidizes the industrial agriculture. Take away those subsidies or put them back into organic farming.
Yeah, why not? Why not?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to thank, first of all, the viewers for joining us, and so much want to thank Jim for this wonderful film, Scott for his insights, and Sherry, Tish for her knowledge, and Chuck also for the support of Simply Living. And thank all of you. And please, I think Susie might put in the chat one more time, I know it was earlier, so that we can at least try to break even. We would like to continue these films. We're not looking to raise a lot of money, but we want to get these important ideas and alternative ways of looking at our world and making it better. So if you can, please, yeah, you can see in the chat way to donate. If you can, please, we would certainly greatly appreciate it. And thank you so much, everybody.